The ships appeared without warning on a Tuesday morning. They came out of nothing, just suddenly there, hanging in the sky above every major city on Earth. Daniel Carter was drinking his coffee when his phone started screaming with emergency alerts. By the time he reached the command center, the whole world had stopped working. The aliens called themselves the Empire. Within 6 hours of their arrival, they had broadcast their message in every language spoken on Earth. The translation was perfect. Too perfect. It meant they had been watching humanity for a long time. High Magistrate delivered the message himself. His face appeared on every screen across the planet. He looked almost human, but his skin had a gray tint and his eyes were completely black. When he spoke, his voice was calm and certain. People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Empire. We have conquered 47 star systems before yours. We have brought order to 219 worlds. You will surrender all military forces. You will disarm completely. You will provide resources and labor as directed. You have 72 hours to accept these terms. There is no alternative. Resistance is extinction. The transmission ended with images, burning cities, shattered fleets, alien worlds reduced to ash. Each one had tried to fight. Each one had lost. The wanted humanity to understand that resistance was pointless. Daniel stood in the command center and watched the screens. Other military officers moved around him, their faces tight with fear and anger. He had spent 20 years preparing for wars against other humans. Nothing in his training had prepared him for this. They have 3,000 ships, his second-in-command said quietly. Each one is bigger than anything we have. Their weapons work on principles we don't understand, sir. We can't fight this. Daniel nodded slowly. The man was right. In a straight fight, humanity would be destroyed in hours, but something in the message bothered him. They had given Earth 72 hours. If they were truly invincible, why give any time at all? Why not just take the planet? Across the city, Laura was having the same thought. She stood in the United Nations building, surrounded by diplomats from every nation. Everyone was talking at once. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others were shouting about fighting. Most were simply terrified. They're giving us time to break, Laura said quietly. A few people near her stopped talking and turned to listen. Think about it. They could destroy us right now. Instead, they're showing us images of dead worlds. They're giving us time to panic. They want us to surrender without a fight. An older diplomat shook his head. Because fighting them would be suicide. You saw those images. Those civilizations had space travel, advanced weapons. They still lost. Yes, Laura agreed. But they fought. Every single one of them fought first. They had to destroy them. That costs resources, time, ships, lives. They are giving us the chance to surrender because it's cheaper than fighting us. The room went quiet. Everyone was thinking about what that meant. The world leaders met in a secret location that evening. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists gathered by secure video link. The debate lasted for hours. Some argued that surrender was the only way to save lives. Others said that life under rule would not be worth living. Daniel Carter attended the meeting as a military advisor. He listened to every argument. When his turn came to speak, he kept it simple. They have beaten everyone they fought, he said. That's true, but think about why they're giving us time. Their hopping fear will do their work for them. If we surrender now, we're telling them that humans will give up without even trying. Maybe we can't win. Probably we can't. But if we surrender without fighting, we die as slaves. If we fight and lose, at least we die free. The room erupted in arguments again. But slowly, over the next 2 days, a consensus formed. Not everyone agreed. Some nations wanted to surrender. Some wanted to fight. But enough agreed on one thing. They would not give up without knowing what humanity was capable of. Laura was chosen to deliver Earth's response. On the 3rd day, exactly 72 hours after the ultimatum, she stood before cameras that broadcast to the entire planet and to the fleet above. High Magistrate appeared on the screen in front of her. He looked relaxed, confident. He clearly expected humanity's surrender. Magistrate, Laura began. Her voice was steady. I am Ambassador Laura speaking for the people of Earth. We have considered your ultimatum. Our answer is no. His expression did not change, but something flickered in his black eyes. Confusion, maybe, or surprise. You refuse, he asked. You understand what that means? Yes, Laura said. We understand perfectly. You will try to destroy us. You may succeed, but we will not surrender. We will not disarm. We will not become slaves. If you want Earth, you will have to take it from us. Your species will be extinct within a week, said flatly. We have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Laura nodded. Maybe, but they fought you first, didn't they? Every single one of them. You've never had a species just give up without fighting. That should tell you something, Magistrate. Freedom matters more than survival. We would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. Stared at her through the screen. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke, and for the first time there was emotion in his voice. Anger. Then you will die, all of you. Your cities will burn, your fleets will be scattered. Your people will beg for mercy, and it will not come. This is your last chance, Ambassador. Surrender now or face extinction. No, Laura said simply. We will see you in battle, Magistrate. She cut the transmission. For a moment she stood alone in the room, her hands shaking. She had just condemned billions of people to war against an enemy they could not defeat. But when she walked outside, she heard the sound of crowds cheering. People had gathered in the streets, watching the broadcast on their phones and screens. They were not cheering because they thought they would win. They were cheering because someone had finally told the no. Daniel Carter watched the broadcast from the command center. Around him, officers were already moving, preparing for war. He pulled up maps and tactical displays. Humanity had thousands of satellites, hundreds of military bases, millions of soldiers. Against it would not be enough, but it was what they had. His phone buzzed with a message from the president. Simple and direct. Make them regret coming here. Daniel looked up at the screens showing the fleet. 3,000 ships, hanging in orbit like a sword above Earth's throat. Humanity had no chance of winning this war, but he was going to make sure they paid for every inch of ground they took. The 72 hours had ended. Now the real fight would begin. And whatever happened, the Empire was about to learn something about humans. They did not surrender. They did not quit. And they would make their enemies pay for every victory. High above Earth, Magistrate stood on the bridge of his command ship. He stared down at the blue planet below. In 200 conquests, he had never had a species refuse his ultimatum. Not once. These humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He suspected they were simply ignorant of what was coming. That ignorance would die with them. Begin the assault, he ordered. The war had begun. The first strike hit Earth's military satellites. Beams of blue energy lanced down from orbit, and within minutes, half of humanity's orbital infrastructure was gone. Communication networks failed. GPS went dark. The wanted humanity blind and deaf. But Daniel Carter had expected this. For 3 days, while diplomats talked, military forces had been preparing. Underground fiber optic cables linked command centers. Radio networks using old technology connected units that they had probably not bothered to scan for. Humanity had spent 100 years building redundancy into everything. Now that preparation mattered. Sir, they're targeting military bases, an officer reported. Edwards Air Force Base just went dark, so did Pearl Harbor. Daniel watched the tactical display. Red markers appeared where strikes hit. The enemy was being methodical, taking out the obvious targets first. They were fighting this like every other war they had won. Overwhelming force. Systematic destruction. Break the enemy's ability to coordinate, then mop up the pieces. Good, Daniel said quietly. Everyone in the command center turned to look at him. They're doing exactly what we expected. Now we hit them back. Captain was already in the air when the order came through. He flew a modified F-35, one of 50 pilots who had volunteered for what everyone was calling a suicide mission. The shields could stop missiles and energy weapons. Human pilots had tested every weapon they had against the ships. Nothing penetrated. But Dr. Amy Collins had found something interesting. The shields generated a harmonic frequency. They pulsed at a specific rhythm, and if you hit them at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right frequency, the shields flickered for a fraction of a second. A fraction of a second was all needed. "All wings, this is," he transmitted. "Target is the cruiser at coordinates uploaded to your displays. Remember the timing. We only get one shot at this." 49 other pilots confirmed. They were spread across the sky, approaching from different angles. The cruiser hung above North America, beautiful and deadly. It was the size of a small city, a single ship that could probably destroy everything below it. Armed the new weapon Amy's team had built. It was simple, really. A shaped nuclear charge timed to detonate in that fraction of a second gap when the shields flickered. They had never tested it. There had not been time. 30 seconds counted down. His heart was pounding. He thought about his daughter safe in a bunker somewhere. He thought about every human who had ever lived free. 15 seconds. All wings engage on my mark. The ship grew larger in his display. He could see the details of its hull now, the strange patterns that might have been writing or art. At 10 seconds, the ship's weapons started tracking him. At 5 seconds, defensive fire began filling the space around him. Mark! 50 missiles launched at once. They came from 50 different directions, all converging on the same point. The shields lit up as impacts began hitting. Blue energy flared around the cruiser. Its defensive systems were overwhelming, destroying missiles by the dozen. But not all of them. 3 missiles made it through, detonating precisely when Amy's calculations said the shields would be down. Nuclear fire blossomed against the hull. For a moment, the light was so bright that had to look away. When he could see again, the cruiser was burning. It was not destroyed, but a massive section of its hull was torn open. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship began to list, slowly falling toward the ground below. "Holy hell," someone transmitted. "It worked, it actually worked." Felt like screaming in triumph, but there was no time. All wings bug out. Get clear before their friends show up. Of the 50 pilots who had launched the attack, 32 made it back to base. Was one of them. When he climbed out of his fighter, his hands were shaking. Ground crew were cheering, hugging each other. Someone handed him a phone. Daniel Carter was on the other end. "Good work, Captain," Daniel said. "You just proved humans can hurt them. Now we need to do it 1,000 more times." Across the planet, Grant watched the same information on a screen deep underground. She was in what used to be a subway maintenance tunnel in New York. Now it was a resistance headquarters. 50 people worked at computers and communication stations, coordinating cells across the planet. Had been an accountant before the came. Now she was running one of Earth's underground networks. She had learned quickly that fighting a superior enemy meant not fighting fair. You hit them where they were weak. You made them pay for every mistake. You never gave them a moment to rest. "They are pulling back orbital forces around the damaged cruiser," one of her analysts said. "They're creating a defensive perimeter." Smiled. "Good. Send the word to cells in affected areas. While they are looking up, we hit their ground positions." They had landed troops in dozens of locations. They were establishing forward bases, setting up supply lines. They were doing everything right by their standards. But their standards assumed the local population would be cowering in fear or already defeated. Humanity was neither. In Chicago, a supply convoy found the roads blocked by rubble. When they stopped to clear it, humans attacked from buildings on both sides. Homemade explosives, military weapons stolen from abandoned bases, even rocks and Molotov cocktails. The soldiers wore armor that could stop bullets, but explosions still knocked them down. And when they fell, humans swarmed them. The soldiers were better trained, better equipped, and more experienced. But they had never fought an enemy that refused to stay defeated. They had never fought an enemy that would sacrifice 10 soldiers to kill one of theirs and call it a victory. In Los Angeles, troops tried to secure a water treatment plant. They found the facility rigged with explosives. When they called for engineers to disarm them, snipers took out the engineers. When they sent soldiers to hunt the snipers, more explosives went off. They eventually took the plant, but by then it was useless, and they had lost 40 troops doing it. Dr. Amy Collins worked around the clock, analyzing every piece of technology humans could capture. Most of it was too advanced to understand, but she did not need to understand everything. She just needed to find weaknesses. The shield harmonics were one. She found others. Power systems used a specific frequency that could be disrupted with electromagnetic pulses. Their communications relied on quantum entanglement that could be jammed with enough interference. Their sensors had blind spots. "They're more advanced than us," Amy told Daniel in a briefing. "But they're not perfect. They're so confident in their superiority that they haven't bothered with redundancy. If we can disrupt one system, their whole tactical network degrades." "Can we weaponize that?" Daniel asked. Amy nodded. "Already working on it. Give me another week." Daniel looked at the casualty reports on his screen. In 5 days of fighting, humanity had lost 2 million people, but they had lost 3 ships and an estimated 5,000 troops. By their standards, it was nothing. By humanity's standards, it was proof that they could fight back. High Magistrate stood on his command ship and stared at the reports with growing disbelief. This was not how conquests went. Primitive species were supposed to break after the first show of force. They were supposed to realize resistance was pointless. Instead, these humans were getting more organized. They were learning from every engagement. They were adapting tactics faster than had ever seen. "Sir, we've lost another supply depot," his tactical officer reported. "The humans are using guerrilla tactics. They strike fast and disappear. Our forces cannot pin them down." "Then destroy the cities where they hide," ordered. "Sir, that will take significant resources. The Empire expected this world to be subdued by now. Command is asking when we can begin resource extraction." Felt a rare emotion, doubt. He had conquered 19 worlds personally. Never had it taken this long. Never had a primitive species bloodied his forces like this. "Tell Command that the humans are proving more difficult than projected. We need reinforcements." His officer looked shocked. Asking for help was an admission of weakness, but was a practical commander. Pride did not matter, victory did. On Earth, gave an interview to an underground broadcast network. His words were recorded and transmitted across every resistance channel on the planet. "They told us we could not fight them," said to the camera. "They showed us dead worlds and expected us to quit. But here's what they did not understand about humans. We do not quit. We do not surrender. Maybe they can destroy us. Probably they can. But we are going to make them pay for it. Every meter of ground they take, we make them bleed for it. And when this is over, win or lose, they're going to remember Earth. They're going to remember that humans do not go quietly." The transmission spread across the planet. People in shelters watched it. Soldiers preparing for the next battle watched it. Even some humans who had wanted to surrender watched it and felt something change inside them. Hope, not hope that they would win. Hope that their fight mattered, that their defiance meant something. Grant sent out new orders to resistance cells. They were adapting to human tactics. Good. That meant humans had to adapt faster, hit different targets, use different methods, never let the enemy feel comfortable. Daniel Carter looked at the strategic map and did the math. Humanity could not win. They had too many ships, too many troops, too much firepower. but they could make the cost high enough that they would start to question whether Earth was worth taking. And if they could hold out long enough, maybe other species would hear about Earth's resistance. Maybe others would find their courage. That was worth fighting for. That was worth dying for. The war was just beginning. 6 months into the war, Earth looked like a different planet. Entire cities were ruins. The sky above was often dark with smoke from burning wreckage, both human and. Millions were dead. Millions more lived in underground shelters, emerging only to fight or scavenge supplies. But humanity had not surrendered. Lieutenant Karen stood in what used to be downtown Seattle. Now it was called New Seattle by the people who lived in its ruins. They had bombed the city 3 months ago, expecting survivors to flee or starve. Instead, humans had dug into the rubble like animals into a burrow. They had made the ruins their fortress. Karen commanded 200 soldiers, a mix of actual military and civilians who had learned to fight. They held a 3-block area that included access to underground water and a supply route through the old subway tunnels. They wanted those tunnels. They had attacked 5 times to take them. 5 times, Karen's people had made them pay so dearly that the movement on the north side, her radio crackled. It was private, a 19-year-old kid who had been studying engineering before the war. Now he was one of her best scouts. Karen moved through the rubble with practiced ease. 6 months of living in ruins had taught her every hiding spot, every sight line, every place where concrete could stop an energy blast. She reached position, a hollowed-out building with a view of the approach route. There pointed 20 troops, 3 support vehicles. Karen studied them through binoculars. They were being cautious, scanning for traps. Good. That meant they had learned to fear human tactics. She keyed her radio. All units prepare ambush pattern Delta. Let them get halfway down the street, then hit them from above and both sides. Her people moved into position. Karen watched the advance. They were good soldiers, she had to admit, disciplined, professional. If this was a fair fight, they would win easily. But Karen had learned a long time ago that fair fights were for people who wanted to die honorably. She wanted to win. They reached the kill zone. Karen raised her hand, then dropped it. The trap sprung. Explosives buried in the rubble detonated. Buildings that looked stable collapsed, burying the support vehicles. Humans appeared at windows and on rooftops, firing everything they had. The formation broke as soldiers scattered for cover. But there were veterans of hundreds of battles. They quickly, returning fire. Energy blasts tore through the buildings where humans hid. Karen saw 3 of her people go down. Fall back to secondary positions, she ordered. Don't let them pin you down. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it was over, they had retreated, leaving behind 8 dead soldiers and 2 destroyed vehicles. Humanity had lost 7 people, with 12 wounded. By pre-war standards, those were terrible losses. By the standards of the last 6 months, it was a victory. Karen knelt beside a young woman who had been hit by a blast. The woman was 19, a teacher before the war. Now she was dying in the ruins of Seattle. She looked up at Karen and smiled weakly. "Did we stop them?" the woman asked. "Yes," Karen said, "we stopped them." The woman nodded and closed her eyes. Karen stayed with her until she stopped breathing. Then she stood up and went to organize the next defense. There was no time for grief. Grief was a luxury for after the war if there was an after. Across the country, Pierce was solving a different problem. He stood in a former shopping mall that now housed 3,000 civilians. They were the refugees from 4 destroyed cities, people who had nowhere else to go. Had been a high school teacher before the war. Now he was something between a mayor and a general, organizing civilians to support the military resistance. "We've got food for another 2 weeks if we ration carefully," his logistics coordinator said. She was a retired nurse named Helen who had forgotten more about organization than had ever known. "Water is not a problem. Medicine is getting critical." Nodded. The supply run from Denver is supposed to arrive in 3 days. If it makes it through, we'll get antibiotics and painkillers. If not, we'll have to make do. People are asking about the news, Helen said quietly, about how the war is going. Looked at her. Tell them the truth, we're still fighting, that's all that matters. The truth was more complicated. Humanity was losing by every traditional metric. The controlled orbit. They held most major cities or what was left of them. They had supply lines stretching back to their empire. Earth was isolated, blockaded, slowly being ground down. But humanity was still fighting, and that was driving the insane. Every conquest in their history had followed the same pattern. Demonstrate overwhelming force, accept surrender, begin exploitation. Earth refused to follow that pattern. The longer the fight dragged on, the more resources they had to commit, resources they needed elsewhere in their empire. Had heard rumors that other species were watching Earth's resistance. He did not know if they were true, but he hoped they were. He hoped that somewhere, another conquered species was seeing that resistance was possible and finding their own courage. Brooks worked in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. He had been a software engineer before the war. Now he ran one of the most important operations in the human resistance, the communication network. They had destroyed satellites, jammed radio frequencies, and hunted down any broadcast source they could find. But his team had built a new network using everything from old fiber optic cables to jury-rigged quantum communication stolen from captured equipment. "Sir, we're picking up increased communication traffic," one of his analysts said. "Looks like they're planning a major offensive." Pulled up the intercepts. They did not bother encrypting their communications much. They probably figured humans could not break their codes. They were wrong. It had taken his team 3 months, but they had cracked the basic military protocols. "They're hitting the resistance cells in Europe," said, reading the data. "Coordinated strikes on underground bases. They've been tracking supply routes." He immediately sent warnings to every cell in the affected area. Some would get the message in time, some would not, but that was better than none. His team also maintained the underground broadcast network. Every day, they transmitted news, instructions, and messages between resistance cells. They shared victories and mourned losses. Most importantly, they reminded everyone that they were not alone in the fight. Today's broadcast included its latest speech. The pilot had become a symbol of human resistance, the man who had proven they could bleed. His fighter wing had destroyed 4 more ships in the last month. The cost had been high, flew with different pilots every mission because few survived more than one, but the impact on morale was immeasurable. Daniel Carter visited its command center that evening. He looked older than he had 6 months ago. They all did. The war was aging everyone fast. "What's our status?" Daniel asked. Pulled up a map of Earth. Red zones showed control. Blue showed human resistance areas. There was a lot more red than blue, but the blue zones were holding. "We're losing ground," admitted, "but we're losing it slowly. They have started requesting reinforcements from their empire. That's unusual for them." Daniel nodded. He had seen the same intelligence reports. "They're frustrated. They expected this to be over in a week. Now they're 6 months in and still fighting." "How long can we hold?" asked. "As long as we have to," Daniel said. "That's the only answer that matters." High Magistrate studied casualty reports and felt something he had not felt in decades: uncertainty. The humans had cost him 19 ships, 8,000 soldiers, and countless amounts of equipment and supplies. The fighting showed no sign of ending. Every day brought new attacks, new tactics, new problems. His superiors were demanding results. They wanted to know why a primitive species was taking so long to subdue, had tried to explain that humans fought differently than any enemy they had faced. They did not care about winning battles. They only cared about making the conquest cost as much as possible. Sir, intelligence reports suggest humans are coordinating a new offensive, his tactical officer said. Side where? Multiple locations. They're spreading our forces thin, then hitting supply lines. That was the pattern. The humans had learned that they could not win large battles, so they did not fight them. They hit where they were weak, then disappeared before reinforcements arrived. It was cowardly, dishonorable warfare by standards. It was also working. Double patrols on all supply routes, ordered. And tell command I need another fleet. If they want this world subdued, they need to commit the resources to do it properly. Corinne sat in the ruins of Seattle that night, cleaning her weapon. Around her, other soldiers did the same. Some were sleeping. A few were talking quietly. They were all exhausted, all underfed, all carrying wounds that would never fully heal. But they were still fighting. A young soldier approached her. He was new, just assigned to her unit. He looked scared. "Lieutenant, can I ask you something?" he said. "Go ahead. Do you think we can win?" Corinne looked at him for a long moment. She could lie. She could tell him that victory was certain, but lies would not help him survive. "I think we can make them wish they had never come here," she said finally. "I think we can fight until they decide Earth is not worth the cost. I think we can inspire others to resist. That's as close to winning as we're going to get." The soldier nodded slowly. "That's enough then." "Yes," Corinne agreed, "that's enough." She looked up at the night sky, where ships still hung like dark stars. Somewhere up there, the enemy was planning their next attack, and down here, humans were planning theirs. The war was far from over, but humanity was far from finished. 1 year into the war, something changed. Admiral Davis watched from the bridge of the newly commissioned Earth defense ship Liberty as her fleet moved into position. Calling it a fleet was generous. She had 12 ships, cobbled together from whatever humanity could build in underground shipyards. They were ugly, asymmetric things, built with stolen technology and human desperation. But they worked. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said. Studied the display. They had a supply convoy moving from their orbital stations to their ground bases. 6 transport ships with a light escort of 2 cruisers. For a year, humanity had watched these convoys pass overhead and been unable to touch them. Now that was about to change. "Begin the attack," ordered. The human ships accelerated toward the convoy. They were slower than vessels, less maneuverable. But Amy Collins had solved the shield problem. The new weapons the human ships carried were designed specifically to exploit defensive systems. The escorts detected the threat and moved to intercept. Energy beams lanced out, striking the lead human ship. Its shields flickered but held. The ship returned fire. The battle was brief and brutal. Human ships took heavy damage, but their weapons punched through shields with brutal efficiency. When it was over, both escorts were destroyed and 4 of the 6 transports were burning wrecks. Had lost 3 ships and taken damage to 5 more. By pre-war standards, those were devastating losses. By current standards, it was a tremendous victory. Humanity had just won a space battle against the Empire. "Salvage what you can from the wrecks," ordered. "Then we head back to base before their reinforcements arrive." The news of the space battle spread across Earth within hours. For the first time since the war began, humans had not just resisted on the ground. They had fought in space and won. The psychological impact was immense. Dr. Jacob White studied prisoners in a secure facility beneath the ruins of Washington. He had been before the war, studying the possibility of alien life. Now, he was interrogating the proof that aliens existed and were trying to kill everyone he knew. The prisoner sat calmly in the cell. His name was Commander, captured when his ship was shot down over Australia. He had been professional during his imprisonment, answering some questions and refusing others according to what Jacob assumed was a military code of conduct. "Tell me about your empire," Jacob said. How many species have you conquered? 218, not including Earth, replied. We bring order to chaos. We unite the galaxy under a single rule. By force. By necessity. Lesser species cannot govern themselves effectively. They waste resources, fight among themselves, stagnate. We provide purpose. Jacob made notes. He was building a psychological profile of thinking. Understanding how they thought was crucial to fighting them effectively. Has any species ever successfully resisted the Empire? Jacob asked. Hesitated. That hesitation was more informative than any answer. Some have resisted initially, finally said. All eventually submitted or were destroyed. Until now, Jacob said quietly. Looked at him with those black eyes. Humans will be destroyed as well. It is only a matter of time. Maybe, Jacob agreed. But we're taking longer to destroy than any species in your history. Doesn't that tell you something? It tells me you are stubborn and foolish. Jacob smiled. From our perspective, it tells us that your empire is not invincible. Every day we fight is another day proving that resistance is possible. That was the key insight Jacob had gained from months of interrogations. The empire was built on a myth of invincibility. Every species they had conquered reinforced that myth. Earth was breaking it, and myths, once broken, could not be easily repaired. Tyler Monroe was 17 years old when the war started. Now he was 18 and one of the most effective soldiers in the resistance. He crouched in the ruins of what used to be Atlanta, leading a team of 15 people on a mission that everyone agreed was suicide. They had established a major command center in the city. It coordinated their operations across the entire southeastern region. Taking it out would disrupt activities for weeks, but it was also the most heavily defended position in the area. Security looks tight, whispered Sarah, a former college student who served as Tyler's second-in-command. Tyler studied the compound through his scope. 60 soldiers visible, probably more inside. Automated defenses, shield generators, it was a fortress. They're expecting a frontal assault, Tyler said, so we're not going to give them one. His plan was insane, which was probably why it might work. The defenses were oriented outward, expecting attack from outside. Tyler's team was going to come from below, through the old sewers. They moved through tunnels that smelled of decay and worse things. Tyler tried not to think about what he was crawling through. The war had made him familiar with experiences he never wanted to have. The team emerged inside the compound perimeter, in a maintenance building that they had not bothered to secure. From there, they split into 3 groups. Tyler took 5 people toward the command center. Sarah took 5 toward the power generators. The remaining 4 set up a firing position to cover their retreat. Tyler's team moved like ghosts, using every trick humans had learned over a year of guerrilla warfare. They avoided patrols, disabled security systems, and reached the command center. The building was not heavily guarded inside. They relied on their perimeter defenses. That was their mistake. Tyler's team planted explosive charges throughout the command center. Military grade, stolen from an armory 3 months ago. They were on a timer, 10 minutes. Charges set, Tyler transmitted. Sarah status. We've got a problem, Sarah replied. Guards changed patrol routes. We're pinned down. Tyler felt his stomach drop. If Sarah's team could not get clear, they would die when the explosives went off. He made a decision. Everyone except Sarah's team start extraction. Sarah, we're coming to you. Negative, Sarah said firmly. Mission is the priority, get clear. Not happening, Tyler said. He was already moving, his team following without question. They had all learned that in this war, you did not leave people behind. That was one of the few rules that still mattered. Tyler's team hit the guards from behind. The fight was short and vicious. When it was over, 3 of Tyler's people were wounded and half were dead. The rest were retreating, calling for reinforcements. "Move," Tyler shouted. His team ran for the exit, dragging their wounded. They made it to the sewers with 2 minutes to spare. Behind them, the compound erupted in alarms as reinforcements arrived. Tyler was climbing down into the sewers when the explosives detonated. The ground shook. Fire and smoke erupted from multiple buildings. The command center collapsed in on itself. His team made it back to safe territory with 1 minute to spare. Everyone was injured. 2 were badly wounded, but they were all alive. News of the raid spread quickly. The young soldier who had destroyed a major command center became a symbol. If Tyler Monroe could hurt that badly, anyone could. What Tyler never told anyone was that he was terrified every time he went into battle. He just kept moving forward because stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant the one. Daniel Carter received reports from around the world. Human forces were getting better, more coordinated. They were still winning battles, but they were winning fewer of them, and every victory cost them more than the last. More importantly, humanity had started to receive secret communications from other species in the Empire. Most were just messages of support, but some were more. Some were pledging to rise up if Earth could hold out long enough to prove that resistance was possible. "We're receiving reports from the system," Brooks told Daniel in a briefing. "They have started sabotaging facilities. Small stuff for now, but it's happening." Daniel felt something he had not felt in months: hope. Not hope that humanity would win. Hope that their fight would matter for more than just Earth. "The know about it," continued. "They're pulling forces from Earth to deal with the situation. 3 ships left orbit yesterday." That was significant. They were overextended. They had conquered too many systems and now could not hold them all if multiple species resisted simultaneously. "Tell our people to hit them harder," Daniel said. "While they're distracted, we push." High Magistrate stood in his command center and felt the Empire crumbling around him. Not literally, not yet, but the cracks were showing. The humans had been fighting for a year. A year. That was unprecedented, and now other species were taking notice. They had begun small acts of sabotage. They were refusing some orders. Even they, who had been conquered 300 years ago, were showing signs of unrest. "Sir, Command is demanding a status report," his communications officer said. Knew what that meant. The Empire was losing patience. They wanted Earth subdued immediately, but knew that was not possible anymore, not without committing forces they could not spare. "Tell Command that to properly subdue Earth, I need 5 more fleets," said. "Either that, or I need authorization to use weapons that will make the planet uninhabitable." The communications officer looked shocked. "Sir, the Empire wants Earth's resources. Making it uninhabitable defeats the purpose." "Then they need to send me more forces. I cannot win this war with what I have." It was the first time had admitted, even to himself, that he might not win. That thought would have been unthinkable a year ago. Now it was simply reality. Davis led her fleet on 3 more missions in the following weeks. Each time, they struck supply lines and retreated before reinforcements arrived. She lost ships with every engagement, but she also proved that humans could fight in space. Tyler Monroe led 5 more raids. Each one was suicide, and each time he survived. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who kept rolling dice and had not come up with a losing number yet. Karen held Seattle against 2 more major assaults. Her forces were down to 120 people, but they still held the tunnels. Pierce kept the civilians alive and organized. When food ran low, people shared what they had. When medicine ran out, they improvised. When hope seemed impossible, they reminded each other why they were fighting. The war ground on. Humanity was battered, bleeding, exhausted, but they were still fighting. And across the galaxy, other species were watching and learning. The tide was turning, slowly, painfully, but turning nonetheless. The Empire's myth of invincibility was dying, and with it, the fear that had kept hundreds of worlds in chains. 18 months after they arrived, their empire was facing its first true crisis in 200 years. 4 species had risen in open rebellion. 12 others were showing signs of unrest. Supply lines were being sabotaged. Forces were stretched thin across hundreds of star systems. And at the center of it all was Earth, still fighting, still bleeding, still refusing to quit. Daniel Carter stood in the ruins of Washington and watched the morning sun rise through smoke-filled skies. He had received intelligence that morning that changed everything. The Empire was pulling forces from conquered systems to deal with the spreading rebellions. Half of the fleet above Earth was being recalled. That meant 2 things. First, humanity had inspired a galaxy-wide resistance. Second, they were vulnerable for the first time in their history. "We hit them now," Daniel told his command staff. "Everything we have, every ship, every soldier, every resistance cell, we show them that Earth cannot be held." Laura worked the diplomatic channels, reaching out to the species who had begun their own rebellions. They were particularly active, having destroyed 3 facilities in the past month. They had risen up completely, engaging in open warfare. Others were preparing. "If we can force them to withdraw from Earth," Laura told Daniel, "it proves that the Empire can be defeated. That proof is worth more than any military victory." Prepared his fighter for what everyone knew would be the final battle. His squadron had been reduced to 8 pilots. Everyone he had trained with was dead. He was flying with kids who had learned to fly in simulators, who had never seen peacetime. "Captain," one of the young pilots asked, "do you think we'll win?" Thought about all the people he had lost, all the missions that had ended in fire and death. He thought about his daughter, who he had not seen in 6 months because she was in a secure shelter somewhere. "We're already winning," said. "We've been winning since the day we told them no. Today we're just making it official." Davis commanded the largest human fleet ever assembled. 23 ships, a mix of new construction and repaired wrecks. Against what remained of the orbital fleet, the odds were almost even. That was something no one had imagined possible 18 months ago. "All ships prepare for orbital assault," transmitted. "Target their command vessels. If we can take out their coordination, their whole fleet becomes vulnerable." Tyler Monroe led the largest ground offensive since the war began. 5,000 soldiers, drawn from resistance cells across the continent. Their target was the main headquarters in what used to be Chicago. If they could take it, they would capture or kill the ground command staff. Tyler was 19 now, a veteran of 30 missions. He had seen enough death to fill a lifetime, but today he felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. "All units advance," he ordered. The attack began at dawn across every front. In space, fleet engaged the orbital forces. Human ships were destroyed in the first minutes, their wreckage falling like burning rain. But they were taking ships with them, and the ratio was getting better. On the ground, Tyler's forces hit the Chicago headquarters from 4 directions at once. Defenses were formidable, cutting down the first wave of attackers, but more kept coming. Humans had learned to fight like water, flowing around strong points, finding weaknesses, never stopping. Karen led her forces out of the ruins of Seattle in a coordinated attack with 7 other resistance cells. They struck every position in the region simultaneously. They could not respond to all threats at once. High Magistrate watched his tactical displays with a growing sense of doom. The humans were coordinating a planet-wide offensive. His forces were being attacked everywhere at once. His orbital fleet was engaged with human ships, and he had just received orders from the Empire. "Withdraw all forces from the Sol system. Reassign them to deal with the rebellions." Stared at the message. They were ordering him to abandon Earth, to retreat. In the entire history of the Empire, they had never retreated from a conquest. "Sir, what are your orders?" his tactical officer asked. Thought about his duty, about his pride, About 200 successful conquests and this one failure. Begin withdrawal procedures, he said quietly. All forces to pull back to orbital positions. Prepare for departure. His officer looked shocked. Sir, we can still defeat them. Give us time. We do not have time, said. The Empire is fracturing. Other species are in open rebellion. If we do not address those threats, we lose more than one world. We lose everything. The order went out across the forces. At first, human commanders thought it was a trick. But as troops began pulling back from positions they had held for months, the truth became clear. They were leaving. Tyler Monroe stood in the ruins of the headquarters in Chicago. His forces had taken it at a terrible cost. 2,000 of his 5,000 soldiers were casualties, but they had won, and now they were retreating. He watched transport ships rising into the sky, carrying troops away from the battlefield. Part of him wanted to shoot them down. Another part was just glad the killing might stop. Davis pursued the retreating fleet for as long as she could. Her ships were too damaged to follow them out of the system. She had started the battle with 23 ships. She ended it with 9. But they were leaving. Humanity had won. 3 days after the battle, Laura received a message on a diplomatic channel. High Magistrate wanted to speak with Earth's representatives before he left the system. She met with him virtually, his image appearing on a screen. He looked tired, older than he had 18 months ago. Ambassador said formally, the Empire is withdrawing from the Sol system. Your species has earned its freedom. We never lost our freedom, Laura replied. We just defended it. Nodded slowly. I have conquered 19 worlds. I have fought against species with technology superior to ours. I have faced armies 10 times larger than mine, but I have never fought an enemy like humans. We're not special, Laura said. We just refuse to give up. That makes you very special, said quietly. Most species, when faced with overwhelming force, calculate the odds and surrender. Humans do not calculate. You simply fight. It is inefficient. It is costly. It is irrational. It's called freedom, Laura said, and it's worth any cost. Was quiet for a moment. The Empire will not forget Earth. Other species have heard of your resistance. Some are rising in rebellion. You have damaged us in ways I cannot fully express. Good, Laura said without sympathy. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to conquer anyone. Maybe, agreed. He looked at her with those black eyes. I must ask you something, Ambassador. Knowing what it would cost, knowing how many would die, knowing you could not win, why did you fight? Laura smiled sadly. Because life without freedom is not life at all. Because we wanted our children to know that their parents did not surrender. Because we would rather die standing than live kneeling. Take your choice. Nodded. I understand now, too late, but I understand. He paused. I must warn you, the Empire is not finished. We will recover from these rebellions. We may return. Then we'll be waiting, Laura said, and we'll fight you again and again, however many times it takes. The transmission ended. Laura sat alone in the bunker that served as Earth's temporary government center. Around her, people were celebrating. They were leaving. The war was over. But the cost had been immense. 50 million dead, cities reduced to rubble, the planet in ways that would take generations to heal. Daniel Carter found her there an hour later. He looked as exhausted as she felt. We won, Daniel said. It sounded more like a question than a statement. We survived, Laura corrected. That's as close to winning as anyone gets in war. The other species that are rebelling, Daniel said. They're asking for our help, for advice on how to fight them. Laura thought about that. Earth was in ruins. Its people were exhausted. They had barely survived their own war, but they had learned how to fight an empire. That knowledge could free a galaxy. Then we help them, Laura said. We share everything we learned. We show them that resistance is possible. Flew one last mission, leading a patrol as the last ships left the system. He watched them disappear into the distance, heading back to their troubled empire. "Should we follow them?" one of his pilots asked. "No," said, "let them go, we've done enough." He thought about all the pilots who had died, all the missions that had ended in fire, all the times he had wondered if humanity would survive the next day. They had survived. Against all odds, against all logic, humanity had survived. Tyler Monroe helped clear debris from the streets of Chicago. The victory celebrations had ended. Now came the hard work of rebuilding. He worked alongside former soldiers and civilians, clearing rubble, searching for survivors, beginning the long process of reconstruction. A young girl approached him while he was working. She was maybe 7 years old, dirty and thin but alive. "Are the aliens really gone?" she asked. "Yes," Tyler said, "they're really gone." "Did we win?" Tyler thought about how to answer that. He thought about the cost, the destruction, the millions dead. But he also thought about the fact that this little girl was still free. "Yes," he said, "we won." Karen stood in the ruins of Seattle and looked at what her people had defended for 18 months. It was barely recognizable as a city, but it was still theirs. They had held it. Around her, survivors were emerging from underground shelters, blinking in the sunlight. Families reuniting. People crying with relief and grief in equal measure. "Lieutenant," one of her soldiers asked, "what do we do now?" "Now," Karen said, "now we rebuild, we bury our dead, we heal, and we make sure we never forget what we fought for." 6 months after the withdrawal, Earth was still in ruins, but construction had begun. New buildings rising from the rubble, farms being planted in irradiated soil, ships being built to replace those destroyed. More importantly, reports came in from across the galaxy. The rebellion had succeeded. They had driven forces from their home world. 3 other species had risen up. The Empire, for 200 years the most powerful force in the galaxy, was fracturing. A monument was built in the ruins of Washington. Simple granite listing the names of the dead, 50 million names. At the top, carved in letters that could be seen from orbit. "To those who refused to kneel. To those who showed the galaxy that freedom is worth any cost. To those who proved that humans do not surrender." Daniel Carter attended the dedication ceremony. So did Laura Davis, Corinne, Tyler Monroe, and thousands of others who had fought and survived. "We paid a terrible price," Daniel said in his speech. "We lost millions. We destroyed our world. But we also showed something important. We showed that an empire built on conquest and fear can be defeated. We showed that freedom matters more than survival. We showed that humans, when pushed to the edge, do not break." He looked up at the ships that had been left behind, now being salvaged for human use. "They came to conquer us," Daniel continued. "They thought we would surrender. They thought we would calculate the odds and give up. They did not understand that humans do not calculate when it comes to freedom. We simply fight, and we will keep fighting as long as necessary." The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. Other species heard it. Other conquered worlds heard it. And slowly, one by one, more rebellions began. The empire would never recover. Over the next decade, it would fracture completely, broken by the species it had conquered who finally found the courage to resist. And at the center of it all was Earth, the world that had refused to surrender, the world that had shown the galaxy what defiance truly meant. Years later, when humans finally ventured out into the galaxy, they found that other species remembered. They remembered the broadcasts from Earth, the images of human resistance, the proof that even the strongest empire could be defeated. Some species viewed humans with fear, others with respect, all viewed them with caution. Because humanity had learned something during those 18 months of war. They had learned that they were capable of terrible things when threatened. They had learned that they would sacrifice everything for freedom. They had learned that they were, perhaps, the most stubborn species in the galaxy. And they were fine with that. because freedom, they had proven, was worth any cost, even when the odds were impossible, even when victory seemed impossible, even when the entire galaxy said they could not win. Humans had shown them all that surrender was never an option. They had shown them what defiance truly meant.